So, and so.
I think there will be somebody at the desk.
Exactly, stuff you can use. Yeah. Okay.
They might want one. It is test.
Good evening, everyone. I'm just testing the microphone, which seems to be working. We're just going to start in a couple of minutes, so apologies for the slightly late start. Thank you to all of those of you who were here sharp. We're going to start at 7:10. Thanks. Okay, it's good to see everybody chatting away. I'm just going to bring the meeting to order, and so that we can get on with the speakers. I know that everyone's keen to talk to each other, and that's great. There'll be a chance to do that after the meeting is over. We'll be here, not here, we'll be in the building until about 10, so there's plenty of time to have a chat afterwards, which I'm sure we're all looking forward to. Just to introduce myself, I'm Anne Henderson, supporter and member of Labour Women's Declaration, but in my past, different jobs I've done in the past, I've worked at the Scottish TUC as an assistant secretary, I've worked on the railway, been active in the Labour Party at every level you care to think of, as I know others in the room have as well. I'm going to just quick couple of practical things. The meeting is being live streamed and will be available afterwards on the LWD on our YouTube channel. The live streaming will stop when we move to the Q&A, so we're just recording the speakers, so there's no problem or issue if you want to raise questions. When we go into the Q&A, that bit won't be being filmed, but we might take some notes for writing the meeting up later. And if there is we're not expecting a fire alarm. If there is a fire alarm, just make your way as quickly as possible to one of the fire exits, which are clearly lit with green lighting. Don't use the lift. And the stewards, who are all around in lovely purple jackets, will be able to assist. If you've got any problems during the meeting, just raise your hand and one of the stewards can assist with that. So, can everybody hear me? Excellent. Thanks very much. So, welcome to everybody. I just wanted to just very quickly, couple of quick things. One of the things that I'm really encouraged about by having this chance to discuss this topic around trade unions for women and the relationship between women active in the Labour Party and active in trade unions is just sometimes I think there's a kind of, not say a false division, but unless we all talk to each other and discuss what's going on in our workplaces, in our communities, in our local Labour parties, in our trade union branches, right across everything that we're involved in, we want to make sure women's voices are heard in all those places, and that where policies are developed and changed, we're all in the room, basically. And I think it's very difficult for women, in particular, sometimes, to choose, like being active in a trade union and active in the Labour Party to the level where you take on holding office or take on going out to 5 meetings a week or whatever it is. It's quite difficult to do all that in both the trade unions and the Labour Party. So I know that for many women, they choose which of those two arenas they will be most active in and they will prioritise. So which is absolutely fine, and why I think it's extra good that we have this chance to have discussion. It's one of the things that the annual Women's Conference of the Labour Party, when it's working well and there's adequate time to discuss and hear delegates, which we didn't quite sort this weekend, is that you get a chance to hear all that. You hear women speaking about their experience in their workplace, or what they're doing in the local Labour Party, the local council, or indeed as a Member of Parliament. So that's, again, part of what this weekend, our learning point would be, that the Annual Women's Conference can really play that part. So I'm delighted that the Labour Women's Declaration has brought this platform together. I'll just introduce the speakers as we come on to them. And like I say, there's space for questions when the meeting comes to an end. Jess Phillips MP will be joining the meeting, but has already indicated she can't stay for the whole meeting. So when she comes, I might shuffle the platform of the speaker's order about a little bit, just to make sure that she gets a chance both to hear some of the contributions and to speak herself. So, without further ado, I'm going to start with introducing you to Tracy Gilbert MP. Totally excellent. Tracy is the Member of Parliament for Edinburgh North and Leith, long-standing friend and sister for me in Edinburgh. She's just recently, now she's been elected as an MP. She was, her most recent job was working for USDO as the Scottish Secretary for USDO. And I think we're going to be interested to hear exactly how going to Westminster doesn't mean leaving those women behind.
I'll see if I try and hold this and move this. So, hello everybody, thank you. It's really nice I get a round of applause for having done nothing. So long may that continue. Let's just start there. So first of all, I just wanted to begin by thanking Labour Women's Declaration for inviting me along to speak tonight. And I wanted to say a huge thank you to Anne. Anne's someone that I've met decades ago through the Labour and Trade Union movement. Sorry, Anne, I'm that old as well, and we're getting there. And someone who has fought tirelessly, often to your own detriment, to be fair, for the rights of women and girls in Scotland and across the UK. And indeed to share a platform with all these amazing women, and to you, amazing women, who it shouldn't be hard to fight for women's equality and girls' equality, but it often is. So a huge thank you to you. And to every woman that has to fight for the rights of women and girls every day. So as a newly elected MP for my home in Edinburgh, North and Leith, I certainly wouldn't be here if it hadn't been for the support of the amazing women who've carved the path for me along the way. And as I said in my maiden speech just before conference recess, having grown up in a council house in a mining town in the 80s, in hindsight it was probably inevitable that I'd become a proud product to the trade union and labour movement. I left school at 15 with few qualifications, and I left home not long after. I grew up in a housing scheme, and all the kids in my scheme, none of us were expected to attend university, even the brilliant ones, and I don't include myself in that, by the way. But even the straight-A students were kind of encouraged at best to work in a bank or work in an office. And I really hope that's something that this Labour government will start to address. Because when the school system gave up on us, we just gave up on it. So we just stopped, we got bored and we stopped going. So I left school like a lot of kids, not knowing what I wanted to do. But the only thing I did know was that I didn't want to work in an office. So of course I got a job in an office. So I was on a YT. We were inducted on our first day when we started on our YTS scheme, and I found my path and became a housing benefit officer, and then on to be a trade union organiser, which I'll speak a bit more about in a while. I also did a number of voluntary roles in the community. When I was a kid, there was a YMYWCA, and probably informal childcare as we would call it now, but we would go there during the school holidays, and there was girls' clubs and clubs that we would go to. And through that path, when I grew up, when I was about 18, 19, I volunteered there, so I did some youth work, which led me to do some work in mental health and drug and alcohol projects, and then I was also the youngest ever children's panel member at the age of 19 at the time. I don't know if anyone actually has bet that record yet, but for those that don't know, in Scotland there's a children's panel system. It's a care and justice system for kids dealing with child protection and well-being, so it can cover from truant to abuse to petty crime, and it's a way to kind of advocate for kids. So I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I was always kind of drawn to advocacy work. So I guess the trade union leap was quite an obvious one. I think one of the other things, as well as education, that I think we've got a real opportunity now as part of the stuff that we'll be doing through the New Deal for Workers, which I know we'll be talking about later on. I'll be repealing some of those anti-trade union laws to encourage collective bargaining for women and helping women in the workplace. And as Anna said, before I was elected to this job, my new job, I was the regional secretary for USDAW, and I was the first woman in Scotland to hold that position. And I don't beat Rachel Reeves, and it was 800 years, but it was 134 years that union has been around. So it's quite a feat in itself. And USDAW is a brilliant trade union. It represents a lot of low-paid women workers, so I've got a lot of experience in that, as most of the main trade unions do. They have high percentage of women workers and women members, but not very many people take up those positions and reach the higher levels where the decisions are made. So I'm sure that's something we'll speak about later on as well. But although USDAW was the first trade union I was employed with, my journey started actually with NALGO and then Unison, as when I was the YTS. And it was through women's self-organisation that I first got involved. I wasn't a shop steward. I got involved because projects around violence against women and girls in Edinburgh in the 90s, which were very good at that point. And then I was involved in the L&G, as it was then, self-organised group within Unison. We didn't have the B or the T on it at that point. And through that, at work, we were going through a best value review, so again, policies that were impacting on women. And I then decided to become a shop steward, which is how most people become involved. I didn't feel it was able to criticise the job that other people were doing, so I had to step up and do it myself, and that's how most of us end up getting involved. I then led our team of reps led a really successful industrial action. And actually one of my first speaking things I had to do was I was invited down to a rally in Sheffield, and we got the train down and that was fine, and then I turned up at the event and the person I was speaking after was Tony Benn. So that was that really set me on my strides. And then after that, I think the men in the Edinburgh Union office at the time were starting to get a bit worried about these young women coming forward and maybe stealing their elected roles. So one day, as if by magic, an application for the TUC Academy landed on my desk. I don't know how it got there, so there's a couple of men to thank for that. So I joined, I applied for the TUC Organising Academy, and I was on the second year at the Academy. So people like Ros Foye and Sharon Graham are also graduates of that academy, so I have much to thank the TUC for. And then the Labour Party modelled that, so the Labour Party organisers that we have now are based on that model that the STUC and the TUC ran. And Ulster was my sponsor union, so that's how I made that leap. So when I got selected, my two stepkids were quite young at the time, and it was only a year's contract, so I had a lot of persuading and negotiating to do to actually get a job in Edinburgh so that I could afford to take the role. And again, obviously, like most of us, childcare was obviously an issue, so it's really tricky to get women to be able to progress when you don't have that support, but I was just really lucky that I did. And so I suppose in many respects the rest is history, or her story. So I've done a variety of jobs in the trade union movement, from recruitment and development to area organiser to deputy regional officer, and then on to regional secretary before I took on this role. But that journey wasn't quick. That was 24 years in the making. And I'm proud of what I managed to achieve at that time, but it's not quick and it's not easy. It takes a lot of hard work and determination to get there. During that time I managed to increase membership in the union in Scotland, and we also managed to secure legislation with Daniel Johnston about protection of shop workers bill, which is in law in Scotland, which I'm sure this Labour government is committed to delivering across the rest of the UK. Sadly, I wasn't able to convince the SNP government to end New Year's Day trade-in, but I'm sure if we deliver a Labour government in 2026 in Scotland, they will make sure that that happens. So again, none of these achievements happened overnight, and again, it was really down to the hard work of other women around me and supporting me and enabling me to move on that I did that. And then I now, as an MP, it was never in the plan. It was never something that I really planned to do, but someone planted the seeds, and I'm very grateful for them doing that. I'm really proud of the campaign that we ran in Edinburgh North and Leith with my agent Adam. In a matter of months, we spoke to more people on the doorstep than what that had been achieved in the 4 years before that, in spite of there having been 2 elections, both the Scottish Parliament and the local government elections. And in the short campaign, we spoke to over 2,000 constituents each week, which had never been achieved in the constituency before. We have more women becoming active in the party locally, and some of them are here tonight. Hi. Hello. In the campaign, and there's fewer and fewer photos with just me, the only woman, in those campaign photos as a campaign, which is sadly too often the case in many Labour and trade union meetings. And I wanted to continue to do that, to encourage women so that we can continue to grow our women's representation, because it's so important to have a voice both in the Labour and the trade union movement. And I would encourage all of you to put yourself forward, because unless you put yourself forward, nothing will change. And there's that saying that if you don't see it, you can't be it. And that's not just a saying, it's actually on my time in the TUC, you're learning that's a part of the organising model. But simply put, if you can engage with people, they're more likely to engage with you. And if you share similar life experiences, then they're more likely to relate to you and want to become part of that activity. So it really does matter that women take on these roles. I think that that's paid off for me, because when we were shortlisting for the jobs, a number of the posts I advertised, it was only women. It was all women applicants that applied for jobs. So hopefully that seeing somebody can make that happen. So since the 5th of July, it's obviously been about a whirlwind from arriving from the account when my agent dragged me outside to tell me the result. I don't know what he thought I was going to do, but he took me outside to tell me anyway. So there's obviously a lot of work that we've had to get through, get an office, get staff, how to ask a question, find out how you do anything in Parliament, write and do your meeting speeches, submit questions, helping constituents, visit community places. It's a total whirlwind, and I'm still finding very much still trying to find my feet, and very much trying to find how you get anything done, which seems to be the mystery, but I'm hoping I'll solve that soon. But again, none of this would have been possible if it hadn't been for having a team around me, people that I trust, and women supporting me along that journey. And all I want to do is repay that trust, really, and I won't give up fighting for women and girls for my time that I serve in Parliament as well. So moving on to advice for anybody that does want to do it, I mean, simply two things: just do it. Like, we don't know what we're capable of until we actually try, and get a couple of people around you that you trust, because having a couple of people around you that you trust is imperative, just to be a sounding board, to be able to speak through ideas with, and just have somebody to moan and ask for support with as well along the way. And get an ambitious team, get people around you that you want so they can grow, and help them grow in the choices that they want to do and deliver what they want to deliver as well, because you'll grow together and you will work better together if you've got people around you with the same ambition. Decide what you want to do and try and stick to that. Obviously, I was elected to deliver policy. Working women across the country are in desperate need of us having a Labour government. The policies that have been written that we're talking about, that we'll talk about tonight, have been written by the trade union and the Labour movement. And for women across the country, this Labour government can't come soon enough or quick enough. There's 190 women MPs now in the Labour group, and we'll also need the men to help to start to deliver some of this, because we just can't wait any longer. The gender pay gap is still at 14.8%, rising to 41% if you're self-employed, 54 years after the Equal Pay Act has been introduced. 100 calls an hour for women calling about domestic violence and women dying at the hands of their partners. It's too normalised, often we don't even hear about it. Health outcomes getting worse, crisis in social care, insecure contracts, low paid work, poverty on the increase, poor housing, energy insecurity. We desperately need to deliver our manifesto promises, and particularly around halving violence against women and girls, which I know Jess will speak about in a bit. So, in closing, I just want to say my 15-year-old self would never in their wildest dreams thought that I would end up as an MP, or even as a shop steward, or as a housing officer. That change is possible, perhaps not at a pace that we all want, but we can do it if we work together. So thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to getting your questions later.
Okay, so thanks. Welcome, Jess, for joining the meeting now. Thank you. Thank you to Tracy for that very encouraging contribution to start us off, and certainly that's been the kind of theme of conference. Theme since 5th of July really is how can we all contribute to making that change in a whole number of different ways, and very much with women's voices at the heart of that. I'm going to ask Selma, Selma is the Chief Executive at Southall Black Sisters, to speak now, and then I'll go to Jess, and then Sarah will speak about the Women's Budget Group, so just so you've got a wee idea of what's happening. And then I'm going to hand this microphone along to Selma. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Am I live? Yeah? Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? It is both a pleasure and an honor to be here with you today. I'd like to start by sharing a personal experience that highlights the urgency of our discussions. Last year, I, along with 2 friends, all of us black women, were brutally and violently racially attacked on the London Underground. Our attacker, a white woman, made monkey noises at us. She hurled vile racist slurs and physically attacked us. And this all took place in the presence of an off-duty Met Police officer who stood by and did nothing until the violence escalated. To our shock, a few months after the attack, the Crown Prosecution Service charged the 3 of us, charged us all with common assault by beating, and my 2 friends were further charged with public order offenses, one of which was racial aggravation. This was based on their alleged interaction with a white British Transport Police officer on the platform at King's Cross Station. For 10 months, the CPS attempted to prosecute us, while our white attacker got away with nothing more than a mere caution. Sorry. And that caution was for a single instance of racially aggravated conduct, one which, of course, she accepted. No further charges were taken against her for other instances of racist abuse or the physical attack. Thankfully, all the charges against us were discontinued by the first day of our trial. But that is far from justice. Despite being the victims of a horrific racist attack, we were criminalized for simply being black women who dared to stand up and resist racist violence. Instead of receiving protection, the criminal justice system turned against us and used the very laws used to safeguard us to prosecute us. This experience is not unique. In fact, it reflects a broader pattern of state violence against black, minoritized, and migrant communities. The racist rhetoric and policies of governments are at the root of the discrimination, revealing systemic failures. Our discussion here affirms the power of solidarity, sisterhood, and self-organization, and raises the critical question of how we can strengthen the labor movement for women to ensure their rights are upheld. As the Executive Director of Southall Black Sisters, a by and for black, minoritized, and migrant women's organization that addresses violence against women and girls from those communities, I believe that this question cannot be answered without addressing the structural inequalities and oppression ingrained in our society. A strong labor movement for women rests on a strong women's movement that is committed to the empowerment of all women, regardless of their race, sex, class, and immigration status, and one that's engaged in the ongoing fight against institutionalized discrimination. This is a fight we must persist with to ensure that no woman is left behind. The theme for this conference resonates deeply with the ethos of Southall Black Sisters. It speaks to the strength found in unity, the power of collective action, and the bonds that tie us together in our shared struggles for justice and equality. As we gather here, it's crucial to recognize that violence against women and girls is not an isolated issue. It is symptomatic of patriarchal systems that seek to control women's bodies and lives. Violence against women and girls restricts women's opportunities, including their participation in the workforce and their ability to self-organize. For black, minoritized, and migrant women and girls, this violence is further exacerbated by institutional racism. Institutional racism intersects with and intensifies the marginalization of women at multiple levels, For black women, this means facing compounded forms of discrimination. Not only are they subjected to misogyny, but also to the racism that permeates our society's institutions. This double jeopardy often leaves black women more vulnerable to violence, less likely to be believed, and disproportionately affected by systematic neglect. The alarming 2023 figures on black femicide in London, where black women accounted for 62% of all femicide cases, highlights how the criminal justice system fails us. These statistics reveal a deeper crisis, one that alerts us to the lack of seriousness with which violence against black and minoritized women is treated, and to the insufficient attention given to issues affecting us across violence against women and girls and the anti-racism movements. Undoing decades of, sorry, I've just lost my space here. Undoing decades of under-policing and over-protecting is crucial, especially for the black communities and especially for black women. It is essential to build trust and encourage victim survivors to come forward. We must also confront the misogyny that is entrenched in police forces, where black women are often over-sexualized or reduced to harmful stereotypes, such as the angry black woman. Migrant women, too, face distinct challenges, often being subjected to both racism and immigration-related discrimination. These women are among the most marginalized in our society and ones that have the least state protections. They continue to confront a pervasive culture of disbelief, especially when reporting violence. This disbelief is compounded by their precarious immigration status, which leaves them vulnerable to exploitation because perpetrators often use their immigration status to control them. For decades, Southall Black Sisters have campaigned against the no recourse to public funds condition, which denies migrant women on spousal visas, student-dependent visas, access to public funds when fleeing domestic violence. This policy is cruel. Effectively, it traps women in abusive relationships, forcing them to choose between abuse, deportation, or destitution. Now, while we've achieved success and victories with the introduction of the destitute domestic violence concession, which was later extended under the Migrant Victims of Domestic Abuse concession, these changes are still far from adequate. Although the Migrant Victims Domestic Abuse concession expands support to women on work or student-dependent visas, the system remains flawed. The new cohort of migrant women that can apply under that system can only access support for 3 months. And crucially, there's no direct route to settlement after that 3 months. This limited time frame leaves women at a cliff edge where they are at risk of falling out of status or being forced to return to countries and face continued abuse. In recognition of the deprivation resulting from decades of discrimination against black, minoritized, and migrant communities, we at Southall Black Sisters put forth several recommendations for political parties in the lead up to the general election. These included extending the combined migrant victims domestic abuse concession with the domestic violence indefinite leave to remain model to be extended to all victim survivors of domestic violence. We also included extending the current 3 months provision under the MVDAC to 6 months. We also recommended and put forward lifting the reservation of Article 59 of the Istanbul Convention to ensure that all migrant victims, survivors facing domestic violence have the right to residency. And we also urged the government to introduce a firewall to prevent data sharing between the police and immigration enforcement. This last measure is particularly crucial because, you know, it ensures that migrant women can come forward if they feel free to report the abuse without the fear of being deported. Our ask from the new Labour government remain unchanged. We believe these measures are not only necessary, but urgent. They are essential for creating a system where black, minoritized and migrant victim survivors can safely escape abuse without facing insurmountable barriers. Furthermore, these changes are, you know, what's needed for building trust in the black, minoritized and migrant communities, especially when faith is in the public institutions, particularly the criminal justice system, is at an all-time low. In addition to these asks, we call on the government to take proactive measures to address the root causes of the rising far-right extremism in the country, particularly in light of the recent violence against girls in Southport. Our latest campaign, supported by 64 third sector organisations, outlined 12 urgent demands to the Prime Minister. They include ending the hostile environment, reversing austerity measures, and eradicating institutional racism within policing and the wider criminal justice system. And also rejecting alarmist anti-immigrant rhetoric. These are not just legal reforms, but moral imperatives that recognize the humanity and dignity of all individuals, regardless of their identity or backgrounds. At Southall Black Sisters, we welcome the news of Jess Phillips' ministerial appointment. We saw it as seeing it as an opportunity to drive the comprehensive reforms that are urgently needed. Having worked closely with Jess for many years, we know she understands our commitment to holding both the Home Office and the government accountable for policies that exacerbate the vulnerability of black, minoritized and migrant women. Given the significant barriers and discrimination they face, it is essential that we take decisive action. In the face of structural inequalities, it is crucial that all movements for justice, including trade unions, take a proactive stance. Trade unions have long been key players in advancing social justice, and in this context, their potential to drive broader change is significant. They must stand up in solidarity with the most marginalized of women and advocate for intersectional policies that address the compounded oppressions of race, sex, class, and immigration status. Unions must ensure that women from all backgrounds are supported in self-organizing, advocating for their rights, and resisting violence and discrimination. Because in our fight against oppression, building solidarity across movements with a social justice and anti-oppressive ethos is not only necessary, but imperative. We must stand together with all those who are marginalized and oppressed, recognizing that our liberation is bound and tied up with theirs. This means forming alliances across different social justice movements with the understanding that the fight against gender-based violence is inherently linked to the fight against racism, economic injustice, and other forms of oppression. Solidarity is also a cornerstone of feminist praxis. It involves recognizing our shared struggles and supporting one another in the fight for justice. This solidarity must be rooted in an understanding of intersectionality, acknowledging that while we all face oppression, the nature and impact of that oppression vary significantly based on our identities and our experiences. Building solidarity means actively listening to and amplifying the voices of those who are most marginalized, recognizing and addressing power dynamics within our own movements, and ensuring leadership and decision-making processes are inclusive and equitable. Unions with their history of collective action have a huge part to play in fostering this kind of solidarity across all movements for justice. As we move forward, the Labour movement for women must align with movements against gender-based violence and racism, recognizing that Reforming the system is not just about legal changes, but about creating a society that upholds the dignity and humanity of all women. And with this in mind, let us build solidarity, embrace feminist anti-racist leadership, and work tirelessly to empower Black, minoritized and migrant women, because together we can create a world where every woman can live with dignity, safety and freedom. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Selma. On behalf of everyone, we'll be able to come back to discuss some of those points, but there's certainly a lot there for us all to reflect on, but to also, more importantly, organise and take action on. So I'm now going to hand over to Jess Phillips. Jess, for those of you who don't know, has been an MP since 2015. She represents Birmingham Yardley. She's now holds the position of, in the Home Office, Minister with responsibility for safeguarding and violence against women and girls. And I know that we're all very pleased that Jess has been able to join us. Jess may not be able to stay on for the questions and running the usual thing of going with other commitments, but we're really pleased to see you here. And it's like the beginning of a discussion, really. We're so looking forward to hearing what you've got to say. Thank you, Jess.
Is that better? Yeah, there we go. Hello, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to... This is what you have to do in Parliament. You know, you're meant to immediately before you say that it was a pleasure to follow the person who spoke. And normally that's a lie. So it was genuinely a pleasure to follow you. I once had to say it to, I think it was Liam Fox who'd made a speech about hedgehogs. I was like that. What the hell was that? And I had to say... It's a pleasure to follow you. Only because I'm glad that you've finished. So, anyway, this week I went to an organisation in the south of Birmingham that I have worked with for many years. It was their 20th anniversary, and they're a very small women's support organisation, domestic abuse support organisation called We Are, and it's just a small organisation run by. I mean, they now have 3 members of staff. I think when I first sort of did any work alongside them, they had 1. It's 2 working class women called Jackie and Donna, basically run it, it was their 20th birthday, and I was there to celebrate with them and all the years and all the work that they had done. And I was just firmly reminded of what can sometimes, when, you know, like certainly when I'm sitting in my government minister's office, that you can easily forget that the women's movement is at its heart, it has very much become, in the space of violence perpetrated by men against women, it has become a professionalised arm of the state. And there are all sorts of risk assessments, and there is, like, you know, standards and practice and all these things that actually people like Selma come to me and say we need better standards on this sort of thing. And we go about as a state making sure that happens. And then the voluntary sector is essentially the provision. And what I worry is that sometimes that forgets the absolute heart of what the women's movement was, and to over-professionalise the sense that a couple of women got together in a room and decided, and in Jackie and Donna's case, and Jackie wouldn't mind me saying this, I've spoken about her in Parliament, that her abusive husband was... Such was the abuse against her that her son took his own life, and it's 25 years since he died as well this year. And it was just women who'd had enough and wanted to help other women. And there is no thing that I can design that will monitor and measure what it means that women who get together to just have a cup of tea with another woman and put down, the whole refuge movement starts when somebody puts down a dirty mattress on the floor of a squat, and we must never ever forget the heart of that. But what I was reminded of mostly in this meeting with Jackie and Donna and all these other fancy people who'd come along the way was that the women's movement isn't just that. And it wasn't just that I had helped Jackie and Donna over the years by either volunteering, or she reminded me of one time when I literally had to clean out the entire area because the Police and Crime Commissioner was coming and it was filthy. But it wasn't that. It's that the women's movement always sought to hold other women up in order that they could get power to change things for the long term. The women's movement is not just a support system. It is a ladder that is built so that women can gain power. And as much as they wanted to thank me for everything I'd done, however powerful or not powerful I'd been in their history, I wouldn't be sat where I am today, and I wouldn't have a ministerial office if it wasn't for the collectivism and the organisation of women allowed to do that, free to do it and free to express themselves in that space. And so we must never, ever underestimate the actual power of women's solidarity, and we should never, ever forget the roots of the women's movement that leads us to having organisations like Selma's that now is invited into government offices to talk about what policies should be. Like, that's not how it started. The struggle was the thing, and we must never ever forget the struggle. I recently accused somebody of buying their feminism from Claire's accessories, and that it's not It's not about being liked. It's not about like having the fancy days. It is a struggle. It will always be a struggle, and we will always have to fight, and we can only do that if our sisters join us with us, because otherwise you start to go mad. And so we must always remember that the patriarchal powers will always seek to turn us against each other, and we must always resist that and keep on supporting each other. And so I just was reminded of that. And it was entirely down to the likes of Jackie and Donna and Maureen from Birmingham and Solihull Women's Aid, and Salma's predecessor, Pragna Patel at Southall Black Sisters. I could name literally hundreds of women who made the pathway so that I would end up as the minister in this space, enabled to make decisions. And so it is only then that you have to be completely and utterly ambitious with that, at the same time as, I would say, expecting some patience in the fact that what we have to do is overturn an enormous and systematic problem. For decades now, we have seen the brilliant women's movement turned into a professionalised movement that every now and again would get something bolted on because some woman got murdered somewhere and it made the news. And we cannot any longer tolerate that bolt-on, that couple of million quid over here because we've got a problem. And the point that Selma was talking about with regard to no recourse to public funds is that I just want to say, in solidarity with Selma, is that every single change that has happened that has been systematic in this space is entirely linked back to Southall Black Sisters, without a question of a doubt. So it originated in the Sojourner Project, which I have to genuinely tell you that when I worked in a women's refuge, we used to call it the Sojourner Project. It was only when I was literally on the Eurostar that I realised that it wasn't Sojourner, it was Séjourner. Because it means, well, like, enjoy the journey. And I remember looking up at the word and thinking, oh, look like the Sojourner Project, and then realising that I was illiterate. The Sojourner Project under the last Labour government, which was put in place to try and stop the destitution of women with no recourse to public funds, that then turned into the domestic violence concession, that now is the only since April, isn't it? Now I still haven't. I still call it the bloody Sojourner, let alone now the DD set. That is now the migrant. Like every single bit of progress that has happened along the way has happened because Southall Black Sisters have pushed and pushed and pushed and found solidarity in various movements to do that pushing. No, but I mean, it is. I mean, you're right. It was done by the last government. I'm not here to defend the last government. Recently, I was asked to do something, and it was literally to defend something that Suella Braverman had done as the Home Secretary. I was like that. I don't even need to read the details. You can fuck off. It's like, no. It's like, if there has ever been any progress, any expansion of it, it is because of that solidarity. And so too will that be the case in the future. And so, like, any progress that we make has to be systematic. It can't just be that the Home Office was frightened and so gave £1 million to Southall Black Sisters to fill a gap. We can no longer accept the bolt-ons of a little bit of policy here, a little bit of a little pot of money here, and that's all we could have expected for the last decade. And so that was all we strove for. And fair enough, we made some strides, but the changes that have to be made are so fundamentally systematic, and not just systematic. They have to be locked on with chains and padlocks, like our suffragette sisters sought to do, because I myself worked in a Sure Start Centre. When my children were born, they had the services of a Sure Start Centre, and I watched how those were removed so easily. And but you know, like, it is lovely when everybody is pleased that it's me, and people like Selma say that it's like a relief to have someone like me in that job. Well, don't sentence me to having to be there for the rest of my life. I will only, that it cannot rely on there being somebody who understands it in the building. We have to make systematic changes, and when we make this target of halving violence against women and girls, it has to be so systematic so that it can never be undone, whether that is in our health services, in our housing allocation, in the way we build our housing, in the way that we deal with welfare, in the way that we deal with immigration, in the way that we deal with everything. There needs to be fundamental and systematic change. And so it will seem like at times that you should be impatient, because I'm not there like the previous government, just announcing something for the sake of announcing something every, like on International Women's Day, or like, on the 16 days of action. Whoever settled on it being 16 days, and why? Is something that the UN could I'd like the answer for. Why is it 16 days, and why is it such a random time of year? Anyway, but that's not when it matters. It doesn't just matter on Mother's Day that mothers get murdered. And so I will constantly try to resist that level of change, and always be seeking longer-term change, so that when migrant women come forward, regardless, that there is systems in place that don't rely on one pot of funding existing over here, that it is a fundamental to our system, that this is a standard that we should expect. And so that is what we hope to do. And one of the things I was asked to talk about was how, I presume it was how the trade unions and how women here can struggle. And that one thing I would say initially, and Selma pointed to a lot of this in her remarks, is that the race equality movement often forgets women, and the women's movement often forgets race equality. And I'm going to say the same about the Labour movement. As well, and the idea that, I'm from Birmingham, where we are currently having to shut down services because of decades of a lack of equal pay. So what I would say is that this struggle, this movement, we will only succeed in it if there is solidarity across the divide. And I have found over many years, and certainly when we try and change work-based practices, and you need look no further than what is happening at Harrods over here, which people keep asking me if I'm surprised by, and I think I cannot believe you are surprised by this story. I'd be surprised if it hadn't happened. I'd be literally shocked. Like, we have to make sure that all of our movement makes this a core, and I would say that to the trade union movement as well. Violence against women and girls is absolutely core to the labour movement and has to be. And when we are striking to negotiate our work-based practices, and there is going to be a lot of negotiation about this over the coming weeks and months, do not ever forget that, I mean, billions is taken out of our economy just on lost work days due to the violence that women suffer at the hands of men. If that doesn't form a core of some of the things that we see changing, whether that's about non-disclosure agreements to silence people, whether it's about pay for people to go to court or to flee, or whatever it is, but what we have to understand as a labour movement is that when we're working with people, you can't just be good and have good attitudes and good policies about victims, because you are also employing perpetrators of this crime. And we have to, as a society, we have to have a much, much keener eye on the idea that we love and care about perpetrators of this crime. They are not monsters who exist over here. They live on your street. They are in your family. You're working alongside them. I mean, I work in Westminster. They're everywhere. We have all got to come to terms with this in a much, much greater way, and I will not achieve anything from the very ambitious target that the Labour Party has set on this, and rightly so, unless the entire movement. And there will be times when you will be disappointed with me, undoubtedly, and it probably won't be me, it's probably somebody else telling me I can't have it. And I will rely on you to push. And I won't necessarily be able to be at the front with a banner like I have always been. But I can't resign over everything. Really got to pick that moment. And so I will need the women in our movement to push me for better as well. And I will expect it. And if you don't do it, I'll be really disappointed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And absolutely, that message that there's so much all of us need to do, and the movement needs to be with what Jess is outlining. The target is ambitious, shall we say? But needs the movement, and it needs to be higher up the trade union movement's agenda. So that's our job in this room, and that's one of the reasons why it's so good to see so many women here. And Jess is really sorry, but she has to leave, but we look forward to further conversation. Thanks very much, Jess. So I have to, social media, so the meeting's being live streamed, as I said. I have omitted to bring this to your attention, but it is on Twitter. There are 2 hashtags, those of you who follow these things. It can obviously be picked up tomorrow as well, picked up later. But the hashtag is LWD Liverpool 24 and Unions for Women. So that can be followed for a commentary as well. Kiri Tunks has joined the platform now. She is going to speak to us in a wee while about the work that Filia is doing through a trade union project. Before that, we are going to go to Sarah Rice, who's going to speak to us from the Women's Budget Group. And you will hear from Sarah herself, but absolutely overlaps with some of the contributions from, all 3 of the contributions that have been made so far in terms of how we address some of the inequalities, that structural inequalities that exist, and a new report that's just been launched today by the Women's Budget Group
going forward with the links that can be made with what we should expect from employment law changes. So, Sarah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Kiri, for the invitation to be here at the panel. I'm blown away by the very powerful contributions that were made so far this evening. So quite tough acts to follow, but I'm going to do my best. So as Anne mentioned, I'm Sara Reis from the Women's Budget Group. As a bit of background about who we are, so we are a feminist think tank, and what we do is we analyze economic policy for its impact on women and men. So we do a lot of work, especially around the budget, to look at the tax and benefit changes, the spending decisions of the Chancellor, and how they affect women in particular, and particular groups of women as well, because as was mentioned in this panel, there needs to be a much better recognition of the intersectional inequalities that women face. So we also have been doing some work recently on the upcoming employment rights bill. And I think it's fair to say we are cautiously optimistic about this bill and the positive impact that it can have on women's working lives. I think, any bill that takes its job seriously of strengthening workers' rights, of tackling precarious employment, of dealing with low pay, low earnings, is going to have a disproportionate positive impact on women, because women are more likely to still be in those positions in the labor market. So, we all know about the gender pay gap. It's still at around 14% when we look at hourly pay, but when we look at what we call the earnings gap, which is basically based on people's weekly earnings, it's much wider. So it's currently at 25%. And this is because women are more likely not only to be in low-paid jobs, but also because they are more likely to work part-time still. So it's a double impact on what they have at the end of the month, at the end of the week, to cover their bills, to cover their cost of living, basically. And the reason that women still occupy this disadvantaged position in the labor market can be traced to care. So at the heart of it is still the uneven distribution of care work, housework, between women and men. So women still do the majority of unpaid care work within our families, within our communities as well. We've just heard from Jess about how women come together to organize, to support each other, and very often that is unpaid. It's on a voluntary basis, but it takes women's time and leaves them with less time to engage in the labor market, to engage with in paid work, and that has repercussions across virtually all areas of women's lives. So, if women are restricted in the jobs, the types of jobs, in the amount of paid work that they can do, they will obviously have less earnings in the present time, but it also has an impact throughout their lives. So, if you have lower earnings, you will then, by the end of your life, will have accumulated less wealth, including less pension wealth, less assets, less savings, which means that at the moment, women in old age are more likely to live in poverty than men. And also throughout their lives, women are more likely to rely on things like social security, benefits, public services, and so they are disproportionately impacted when these things are cut, as they have been since 2010. since, you know, with the austerity measures that were introduced by the Conservative, the coalition government and the Conservative governments, we have seen women's living standards decrease because of their more likely reliance on public spending. So obviously this then all feeds into gender stereotypes, the types of things that are assumed that women and men are good at, the roles that they play in society, meaning that caring, the act of caring is something that is undervalued in society, whether it's done within the home, but also in the labor market. So at the moment, some of our lowest paid sectors in the labor market are those that are based on care. So things like adult social care, child care, those are some of the lowest sectors in the labor market, with some of the most precarious conditions as well, working conditions. And it's not a coincidence that those are also the sectors where you have a vast majority of female workers. So all of this, you know, the ultimate sort of impact of this is if women are restricted in the sorts of careers, jobs that they can go for, they end up being underrepresented at the sort of the upper echelons of society. So we then end up with a system, as we currently have, that takes the male worker as the default. It doesn't take women's kind of life patterns or caring responsibilities into account, and we end up with a labor market that isn't suitable in many cases for women, or penalizes them for those extra responsibilities that they have. So, cue in the Employment Rights Bill. As I said, we are hopeful, we are cautiously optimistic, and so I'm just going to flag a few measures that I think that are planned to be included in this bill. So the bill hasn't been published yet, but we are basing this on pre-election commitments that were made by the Labour Party and their commitments on strengthening workers' rights. So a few of them that we think will have a massive positive impact on women's working lives. Things like extending sick pay. So at the moment, we have twice as many women that are not eligible for sick pay as men. And this is because there is a earnings eligibility threshold. So if you earn less than that, and I think currently it's £123 a week, so if you earn less than that, you're not entitled to sick pay. Women are more likely to be in that position. So getting rid of this threshold would, and also extending sick pay to all workers, would mean that we estimate 1.5 million additional women would have new rights to sick pay. So that would make a massive difference, especially in a context where we know we are seeing a trend of more and more women falling out of the labor market because of ill health. So since the pandemic, this has been a trend that has sort of accelerated. And so sick pay is crucial here, because if people cannot take sick pay to once, you know, they start getting into ill health and treat problems when they arise, then they will, you know, they will be in a position where they will have no choice but to drop out of the labor market because their health doesn't allow them to contribute in that way anymore. 0 hours contracts, the plans to ban 0 hours contracts is also really important. Again, women are more likely to be in this sort of precarious form of employment than men. They are particularly rife in sectors where we have a majority of female workers. So again, social care, it's used massively, 0 hours contracts, but also things like hospitality, accommodation, and so women are more likely to be in these kinds of things. So we estimate roughly 500,000 of women to have new security in their employment if zero-hours contracts are banned. So we're not talking about, you know, a few thousand or tens of thousands. We're talking really millions of women to whom these new rights, these new rights in the workplace would make a big difference. So also, and to speak to the theme of the panel today, the collective bargaining. So there's also some measures that are planned to introduce fair pay agreements. To begin with, in the social care sector, which again is a really important measure. It will have a disproportionate positive impact on women. Women are, I think, a bit less than 90% of the social care sector workers. So it is a massively female workforce. So, and is a very precarious sector at the moment. We have a massive retention and recruitment crisis in this sector. People are leaving to go, you know, go work for their local supermarket or other local jobs because they will be paid more for a fraction of the responsibilities and the kind of the physicality and that this sort of job takes. So fair pay agreements. We really hope that the government goes further and introduces these into other sectors where we know where precarious work is also rife. And again, most of these have a majority of female workforce. So we hope that these are extended to other sectors. Also, very importantly, making flexible working the default. So at the moment, you know, flexible working may often be seen as something that mothers ask for when they return from maternity leave, because now they have to combine care responsibilities with a paid job. We really argue for it to be made the default, because it's only when it's available to everyone, it's only when it's available to men as well, that we can hope that men also start to step in more at home, because it's only when these caring responsibilities start to be shared more equally within the home that we can see women really stepping up in the workplace and in the labor market. So really important making this flexible working the default. And then the last measure that I wanted to flag is the some anti-discrimination measures that are being planned in this bill as well, particularly to do with pregnancy and maternity. So we know that women access employment tribunals mostly because of pregnancy and maternity discrimination. So some measures that are being planned in this bill to tackle this is increasing the time that a woman can bring a claim to an employment tribunal. So at the moment, women have 3 months to raise a claim. Obviously, if you're heavily pregnant, if you are just grappling with a newborn at home, it's an impossible ask of women to really go and fight their employer in an employment tribunal. So increasing the time that women have to raise a claim is important. The government is planning, as far as we know, to raise it to 6 months. That's better, and also to introduce protection from dismissal for women on returning from mat leave until 6 months after their return. So this is also important because we know it's something that a lot of women face. But these measures are only as effective as they can be enforced. And so what we're calling for is, in parallel, for the government to strengthen legal aid, strengthen legal support that women can access, so they can actually challenge rogue employers when they discriminate against women, because otherwise they will just, employers will continue to discriminate, will continue to dismiss pregnant women or because they know they can get away with it and nothing will happen. So it's really important that enforcement, that access to justice to be there for these things to be effective. And I also wanted to raise something that is also being planned is the introduction of dual discrimination. So making it so that someone can raise an employment claim based on more than one protected characteristic. So what this would mean was that a woman can raise a claim based not just on being discriminated against on the basis of sex, but also on the basis of race, ethnicity. So that would mean that a black woman, for instance, could raise a claim of anti-discrimination based on not just one inequality, but more than one. Obviously, this, as I've said, we are optimistic about this bill. It is going to make a material difference to women's working lives, and particularly the women who are at the sharp end of our labor market. But it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to fix the gender pay gap. It's not going to fix the inequalities that women face in the workplace or in wider society. We need to go, obviously the government needs to go beyond this bill to do that. If we take care responsibilities at the heart of women's inequalities, then we need to redistribute those caring responsibilities. And we need to do this within families. So, as I said, we need to bring men into the home as well. We need to share the child rearing, the caring for older relatives more equally. We need an urgent review of our parental system, because we know that we need to give the option for fathers to be involved from the very start, because we know that it's when you involve fathers from the very start that those patterns of caring, those sharing of caring, are more likely to stick throughout the child's life. And so that would also be of benefit for women. And we also need to redistribute care between families and society. Raising the next generation, caring for older people, disabled people, is something that we all, as a society, as the economy even, we all benefit from it. And so the costs of doing that should be shared more fairly between families and society. So we have always advocated for a universal system of childcare and early education, so similar to what we currently have with the school system. And our argument is that it should start much earlier, because it would provide high quality early education. It would give children the best start in life. And I think more importantly, it would make caring a true choice, particularly for women. And this would be true as well of introducing a universal adult social care system, so that we can be sure that the needs of people are met, the care needs of everyone are met, but also that caring becomes a true choice and that women are not penalized financially or professionally for doing it. So we need to have those formal or systems in place to allow this. And of course, not to forget that these are sectors where, again, we have a majority of women working, so they are sectors in the labor market that are particularly important as sources of women's employment. But we do need to work on making sure that they have better working conditions, they have better conditions of career progression as well, of professionalizing, and that they are truly properly funded and properly in jobs that are properly paid as well. So yeah, that's my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I'm conscious there's a couple of environmental issues here, one of them being the glitter ball, over which I have no control, but at some point we're hoping we can get turned off. Or not, as the case may be, depends what you want to do. The other thing, certainly here, it feels very warm at the top, so I think the room is getting a bit overheated or is quite warm. So we've still got one contribution, and we've got time, as I said, for questions, but there's also time for informal discussion. So I am conscious that the environment is, that it's quite, well, yeah, it's just difficult to manage. And we'll do our best to change what we can, both on the heating, the air conditioning, the heating, and the glitter ball. Okay. So lots of really interesting things being raised by all the speakers. I'm going to ask Kiri to come in with a bit about what she's doing with the Filia Trade Union Project, which will pick up, I'm sure, on some of the points that have been raised already that we can work together on. Thank you, Kiri.
Thanks very much. I'd really just like to take a moment to reflect on what Labour Women's Declaration has achieved. And I'd just like us to think back to where we were when we started. I just want you to just take a few seconds just to think back a few years, because it's easy to sit here now and forget what a battle it has been to get to this place and to this space where actually the entire meeting, I think, is entirely dedicated to the substantive issues that women are facing in their lives, and these are the fights that we want to take on. I want to, remember what we have faced, and I also want us to remember what we have overcome, because we have been involved in a colossal struggle, and we are really starting to get somewhere. Just look at us now. Look at the way Labour Women's Declaration have operated at Labour Party conference this year, and I think we should just repeat that applause for the whole team who have worked brilliantly. And it is fabulous to have two women MPs on the panel again here tonight, speaking up for women. But I do want to pay tribute to lots of other brave women in the union movement and in the Labour Party who actually paved the way in far more hostile times. I mean, I can't list them all, but immediately people who come to mind: Rosie Duffield, Tonya Antoniazzi, Diana Johnson, Marsha de Cordova, Joanne Lamont. I mean, I know there are people I've left out, but I just want to, remember those women too. The Labour Party may not be quite in the place we want it to be on women's rights, especially on sex-based rights, but we are getting there, and it is important to stop and mark these milestones. It is in a far better place than it was, and the reason for that, honestly, is the collective energy, the principled determination, and the relentless organising of women in the movement. People in this room and further afield have modelled what can be achieved when women come together and organise. And I just think it is inspirational what has been achieved over the last few years. People have talked about the importance of collective organising, and I think it has just been such a wonderful thing to witness and to be part of. Now, we all know that the fight for women's rights is far from over. We know the litany of wrongs women face in all aspects of our lives. We have heard about some of them tonight. I did start making a list while women were speaking about the long list of things that we've got to tackle. And I was going to read some of them out, but frankly, the list is so long and so terrifying that I think it might just demoralise you. So I'm not going to do that. You were listening. You heard what they are. They are huge fights. They are huge fights. But we have also heard a lot of hope, a lot of optimism, and a lot of strength about what needs to be done and the fact that we can do it. As Tracy said, just do it. We have to just get on and take these things on. Doing that means being present in every part of this movement. Okay, that means being present and active in our CLPs. That means being present and active in our union branches, in policy-making bodies, in our conferences. All the systems and structures that have failed us must be made to work for us. And this is work, honestly, that we must take on, because they will not change if we do not take this work on. If we leave it to other people, we will end up with systems that fail us once again. So it is understandable that many women, faced with the obstructions or abuse that have become, have become disillusioned with this movement. I get that. And the fight over sex and gender aside, just the amount of sexism and misogyny that abounds in the movement still, I understand that disillusionment. We have been let down. We've been let down by organisations who are supposed to represent us. We've been ignored. We've been attacked. We've been demonised. But we are still here because this is our party and this is our movement. And we refuse to be expelled by either. In particular, I know that a lot of women have a lot of disillusionment in their unions. I share that disillusionment, but I believe that unions remain a powerful force and that, that they can work for women. Women do make up the majority of trade union membership. It's important to realise that. There is a whole mass of women out there that if we can, get to and support, can become a real force in that movement. There has been talk about building a new women's union, but it would be really, really, really hard, I think, to replace the existing infrastructure of unions or to tempt women away from that kind of workplace representation. So established unions will continue to function and they will continue to make decisions for us, whether we are part of those union structures or not. I think we should be part of those union structures, making sure that those unions are working for us. They do make a positive difference in women's lives. Okay, women in unions have better pay and better working conditions. It's a fact. Than women who do not. Unions do produce and provide guidance, support, advice on a wealth of issues. Okay, my own union, the NEU, has worked closely with UK Feminista to produce materials challenging sexism and sexual harassment with people. Transport unions campaign for safer transport. Lots of unions have workplace toolkits on domestic violence and the menopause. But there is no question that, despite all that, unions do need to do much better for women, which is why Philia did commission research to see what actions it is that for women that are being prioritised, by unions. And to see if they align. If they align with the work that we want to do, then why aren't we working more closely? It is clear, actually, when you look at the motions brought to TUC and Scottish TUC over the last 5 years, that actually the things that concern women in unions are the same things that concern many of us in this room and in our wider organisations. Sorry, I've lost my place. And that does include motions calling out, challenging the sexism and misogyny in the unions themselves, which I think is really, really important. I think it's tempting to just say, my union's done this, I'm really pissed off, I'm leaving. I get that. I get that desire to make that gesture. But in the end, you are removing yourself from the chance to actually change that organisation for the better and to work better for the women in the organisation. A quarter of the motions that have been through TUC conferences in the last 5 years are to do with sexual harassment, violence. The unions do a lot of work, research and working, with lobbying, with governments and so on. We cannot afford to lose contact with that kind of organising structure, and so we have to just make them work for us. Historically, unions have won real gains for women. They've made a huge difference in the material quality of our lives. I'm not going to list all the things they've done. They have done a load. Okay, they do need to do more, but this movement needs women at its heart and at its head, and that is why I am saying to you: do not leave your union. Get in there, change it, make it work for women. Okay, Tracy Gilbert talked about just doing it. We need proper engagement. We need proportionate representation of women in positions of power and agency. And if we can get that, it would not only change unions for the better, it would actually give us the power to transform society. And I think we are talking about radical overhaul of society. It's not good enough the way it's working. We've heard from all the women on how many ways, count the ways in which this society fails us. We must have nothing short of an absolute root and branch transformation of the society in which we live. And I think unions have to be part of the answer in doing that. Philia wants to strengthen the hands of women already in unions. So if you're in a union out there tonight and you're not really active, or you'd like support in being more active, okay, we want to talk to you. If you're not in a union and I'm tempting you to join your union, we want to help you. We want to support you, find out what you need to know to get involved in your union. And in the coming months, we're going to be looking at ways to do that. So we're going to be trying to talk to as many women in the union movement as we can to make sure that we are offering the support that's going to help you take up your rightful place. Let us know. Let us know. Contact Filia, contact me, Lisa Marie, and other women for Filia are in the room. You can contact us and be part of this project that we want to do. Because winning real change in the unions cannot be done from the top down. It cannot be done. It must be done, like Labour Women's Declaration have demonstrated, by collective grassroots organising. Jess Phillips talked about holding each other up, holding the ladder. That is what we need to do for each other within this movement. That means being a member. It means knowing the rule book. It means navigating the protocols, the systems. It means tabling issues, motions, being part of the debate, speaking up. Doesn't matter if you don't like public speaking. No one, here's a little clue, no one likes public speaking. You know, you just do it because it's what needs to be done. And if you don't speak for yourself, somebody else will speak for you. We need to work with others to promote our concerns and ideas. And most importantly, we must not relinquish our place, our rightful place in this movement. Labour Women's Declaration have shown what can be achieved by groups of determined women within hostile structures. Let's be clear about that. Let's take their model into our unions and into our workplaces. Let's win the actions called for by the speakers on this panel. I'm not expecting you to do all those things all at once, but, you know, pick something and start working on it. And let's work together to win these changes that we know will transform not only the lives of women and girls, but also the society in which we all live. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kiri. Just to pick up on a couple of things for everybody who's here. This is the report that Sarah referred to, that the Women's Budget Group has just published. So there's a couple of hard copies here, but it's on the website, Women's Budget Group. And what I was thinking was that we have contact details for all the attendees, so I'm sure that we can arrange to share some of the papers that have been referred to tonight after the meeting's over, because it's a really, really useful document to help with the points that Kiri and other speakers have made. I mean, it's quite, when we get into discussing the employment bill, and again, this is also another piece of, again, we can circulate the link for this. People have referenced the New Deal for workers, or the proposed employment bill the government has promised to bring in within 100 days. And it'll be going out for public consultation. Now, we want women to be at the heart of that, responding to the consultation, and you can take up, it's possible to really develop some of the points that all the speakers have made actually about what that might look like. So that's quite exciting, and certainly Labour Women's Declaration in Scotland, we've been talking about how we can do that, and it provides a kind of way of doing some meetings, but we can circulate the web link to that as well, and some of the other things that Southall Black Sisters mentioned about, like your pre-election briefing, just so that you have a bit more information that will help with promoting discussion amongst your friends, your family, your community and your workplaces, in your constituency Labour parties, and making sure that actually we don't let public consultations go by without an overwhelming response from women that cannot be ignored. One of the points that the proposed employment bill will, just to pick up on a thing Tracy said, which I thought was like, you know, when you were describing your own journey and how on the first day that you were on the scheme, the unions were at the induction day and they come in to talk to you. A lot of that has gone, obviously, and it's a very practical example of when the legislation is changed in this country by this government, there will be the right for unions to go into every workplace. So that, I'm sure it'll be worded a lot more complicated than that, and there'll be a series of provisions around it. But the message is that collective organisation brings change and improves the workplace, both for the workers and the employer, actually. But to cut away the levels of casualisation and chaotic work patterns that now exist for so many people, primarily women, and the examples around migrant women and the different experiences of women, there's a chance to change that through collective organising. So even simple things like trade unions, we would expect membership to increase, but that means us all doing a bit too, and that women really seeing it as an important financial contribution as well. The economic recession in 2008 saw an immediate drop in some sectors because every penny counts, as we know, and so union membership is a cost for people. It's actual physical, an actual cost. So just how we build that voice up and take the opportunities that women have to be right at the heart of that is really what we're, the speakers have all kind of referred to today. So I thank everybody. I'm happy to take a few questions and then we'll break for refreshments, I think. And anyone want a dancing, stay in here, but the refreshments might be through there. Yes, so I've got, I'll just have to do a wee show of hands. I've got, does someone take a microphone down from here to go around the questions, please? Okay, so I've got, there's just at the back, yeah, yourself, who's looking behind you, because to see if there's anyone behind you, but you're at the back. And then the woman who's sitting in front of you, over the far side. Sue, thanks very much, just at the back.